Hello, everyone. Today's guest is a composer and pianist who has never really fit into one musical box. I first met Ron back in the early 2000s, together with violinist Lara St. John. They were doing a project called Orchestra, performing music that was really unconventional, and Ron was playing the accordion, and that's another instrument that he's plays like a madman. He's a virtuoso accordionist on top of being a virtuoso pianist. Since then, his career has continued to evolve across genres. He has an incredible classical album out of 24 Preludes, and also a jazz album that is quite something. So I wanted to talk to him today about those two projects, but I want to let the conversation go wherever it takes us. So Ron, it's so great to have you, my friend. How are
It's
you?
my grand pleasure to be with you. We are reunited after about 20 years or more.
Yes, I
So,
know it's been a crazy journey. Been a crazy
yeah,
journey.
I bet. I wish I knew a little more on the details, but time will give us the chance.
Yeah. But Ron, let's start with. I wanted to talk to you about so many things, but let's start with um, a little bit for people who have never heard you and do not know who you are, and the genius that you are. I wanted to talk to you first about your life, where you started your career. And I mean, you're a child prodigy, somebody who started you're born in Tel Aviv, and right?
Right.
Am I getting that right? I
Yeah,
remember that.
absolutely.
And you started playing the piano, and your father was an accordionist. I mean, that's so much history here. Why don't you start, from the beginning of your
Yeah.
early years, and how you got into
Right.
music, and how you developed this, your pianist, accordion composing skills to such a high level. I mean, it's quite incredible, really. Give us a little history here about that.
It's well, thank you for the high praise. Well, I was born as Ronn Yedidia, and it was 1960 in Tel Aviv. And the first instrument that I picked, or that was chosen for me, was by my father, was the accordion. And I was 6 years old.
Mhm.
And my recollection of it is kind of brief. Things went extremely quickly. Like he tried to teach me when I was 4, but I had no sensibility for reading notes, and he gave up. And then at age 6, he tried again, and this time I was able to grasp it. And then within 1 month, it seemed like I could play fairly demanding repertoire, like the Turkish March by Mozart, Brahms' Hungarian Dance Number 5, the Flight of the Bumblebee by Rimsky-Korsakov. So I remember that for me, I don't remember particular effort. I remember it was very natural, almost easy, I would say, to play. Even though the instrument was bigger than me, it was like reaching to above my chin. It
Mhm.
was because I was little, and the instrument was 120 bass accordion. So
Wow.
just about 2 months, I think,
So
after I
you started
start.
with a regular size accordion?
Yeah, I
Holy
think
moly!
so.
Oh
That's what
wow.
my
Okay.
father had. That's what my father had.
Wow.
Because he was playing it. So, I just used the accordion that my father was playing.
Mhm.
And I remember that performance came very quickly. Like maybe 2 months after learning those pieces, I was giving the first performance. And I was doing it next to my father, who was an actor. He was a well-known actor in Israel. So I became part of his show.
So your
And
father, your father was on top of being an accordionist, he was also an actor.
was also an
That's
actor.
the
And he
one
was.
thing you're not. You're not an actor. That's the only thing missing. Okay, thank God. Yes,
Can I
great. So
surprise
you're not
you?
perfect.
Let me
You're
surprise
not
you.
perfect. You're not an
I'm not
actor.
perfect, but I was an actor. I was a child actor, and
Shit.
I act. Sorry about that. I participated in a
Oh,
few kind of professional shows, but I chose not to pursue it as a career.
well, is it who was the one who said like a gentleman is somebody who is an actor but doesn't act? You know, or did they say that as a joke for an accordionist? A gentleman is somebody who knowing how to play the accordion doesn't play it.
Yeah, maybe, you know,
No,
but acting is a lovely thing, you know. It's something I've used all my life, you know. I need it sometimes.
but so then how did you start? When did you start playing the piano then? And
So, you
how
know,
did that turn into your sort of like, you know, your main instrument? Although, you know, the accordion is also an instrument you're pretty comfortable with. So and you still play it. So
yeah, I mean, the idea was a lot of people, you know, Israel was a very musically educated congregation of many people who knew a
mhm,
lot about music. Those that came, those that immigrated from different countries around the world, mainly Europe, they were all very educated in music, and piano was considered, of course, the king of all instruments. And when I showed the talents on accordion, many people around suggested to my father that I should do something more, quote unquote, serious,
right,
because the accordion was, you know, it was more like a band instrument that I
right.
should learn piano. So at age 7, I started taking piano lessons.
Who? Your teacher was a very important um, pianist there in Israel, right?
That was years later. My first teacher, his name was Gabi Snapir, who was a very close friend of my father from childhood. And he was a wonderful teacher for the beginning level. And I was with him for 4 years. And then I had another teacher. Then I studied 3 years with Enrique Barenboim, Daniel Barenboim's father. That was
Yes, yes.
from age 12 to 15. And then at age 15, I met the teacher that influenced me most, who was my mentor for the rest of her life, Pnina Salzman, who is
Right.
considered the first lady of the piano of Israel.
And when did you have your sort of debut concert? When did you play your first concert?
You know, it's hard to tell because it happened in so many sort of unexpected situations. The accordion thing happened in a settlement in Israel called Givat Chaviva. That's the name. And I remember I played it for the first time. The piano, I don't recall the very first performance. What I recall is my first audition at age 7, 2 weeks after I started playing the piano. And I remember getting an A+ on it, which was obviously memorable, especially if you only just play the instrument for 2 weeks.
Wow.
But I had the advantage of playing the accordion before that. So, you know, that helped me with the piano. And then I was performing all over the country with my father, who was a well-known actor, and I was part of his show. I was like almost in the interval between the two parts of his show. And then at age 8.5, I won the national competition of Israel playing the piano. I was, I think, maybe the youngest to win that one. Was open up to age 18, and it was in the main Philharmonic Hall. And those are the most memorable first encounters I have with performance.
Wow. And what did you play for that competition?
For that competition, it was I was just a new player. I remember Avalanche by Heller and
Oh wow,
Solfeggetto by
yes, yes, yes.
yes.
Heller. Wow, that was a famous composer when I was growing up. Yes,
Uh-huh.
for
And
for a year.
yeah, and Solfeggetto, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Those were seminal works for young pianists.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then when did you start the composition? Because that's a huge one for you. Yes.
I sort of dabbled with it when I was 12, 11 or 12, and I had a big concert where I was performing both accordion and piano, and it was in a town called Ashkelon in Israel. I was 11 years old, and I remember that recital because it was considered my debut recital, playing the two instruments, and there were critics there and all that. And there I played two experimental works of mine. One was called Tarantella, which was influenced by the Pichonka Tarantella in A minor, that is well known.
Yeah.
And the other one was called the Dance of the Dwarfs.
Yes.
And so those were the first compositions, and they were cute. They were, almost improvised. but I really picked it seriously with my first etude for piano when I was 14 years old, and then the first piano sonata when I was 15, 16 years old.
Well, and when did you then come to the U.S.? When did you
Well,
make
first
that move? Did you come to study directly, or you moved
I
first?
was with a group from Israel celebrating the bicentennial of America in 1976. That was my first visit, and I was the pianist and music director of the little band that accompanied a group of 10 singers and dancers, and we went across the East Coast. And that was the thing that sprung the idea of wanting to come and studying here, eventually staying here. So after my military service, I came to study at Juilliard, and that was 1982.
How old were you when you did your military service?
Every Israeli does it between the ages of 18 and 21, and
Okay.
mine was 1978 till 1981.
Yeah. And did you play in a band there, or did you have to be
I
more
refused to do that. They offered me to do, to be a music director of one of
right?
the military orchestras, but
That's
I
what I would
wanted
have done.
no, I wanted a slightly more military experience, something different from music. So I was actually I joined the Israeli intelligence, and
Wow.
did my service there for 3 years.
So once you finish your training, you came to the U.S. with this band, and you were playing what, the accordion, or you would
No, no.
just
The truth is that I came singularly to study at Juilliard. I auditioned at Juilliard in
oh, okay.
1982. Yeah. So I formed the band Prophets when I came to New York and started it in 1982, soon after arriving in New York.
Yeah, we'll
But
talk about that band later, because
Mm,
that's the album that you have with them that came out last year, right? So, but
yes.
we'll get there. We'll get there. I have a lot of questions about that album. Is crazy. So, but tell me, in at Juilliard, you studied with Milton Babbitt, right?
My first teacher at Juilliard was David Diamond.
Oh, David Diamond. Okay, and Babbitt
Yes.
was your teacher at some point
With
there
the
as well,
Babbitt,
or
I went to Babbitt when Diamond went on a sabbatical.
Hmm.
And I stayed with Babbitt, I believe it was 1986 onwards. So for my master's and doctorate at Juilliard, I was mostly with Babbitt.
And the funny thing is, Ron, that listening to your music and I mean, it's just so hard to guess your influences, because your part, I mean that as like, okay, well, Milton Babbitt or Schoenberg or Ives. I mean, it's hard. Usually, when I hear a composer, I can hear a lot of influences, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can be very authentic and original and still have all those influences. But with you, it's hard for me to on the one side, you are your piano pieces, like the Preludes and a lot of the music that I've heard, um, some of them, like the sonatas, are remind me a lot of Shostakovich or Prokofiev, or there's another sonata that I think it was Outcries. Is it
Yes,
like the third piano sonata
that's
that
correct.
is also very much in that atonal language of
Right,
reminded me at points of Ives' first piano sonata, even
right. Hmm.
that kind of language that is sort of atonal, but still with a vein of the romantic language, and the preludes are also very romantic. So, who influenced you most when you were a student at Juilliard? Who were your favorite composers, and what kind of harmonic language sort of inspired you to write your music?
From the time I remember myself as a growing young musician, I just loved every good sound that struck me. whether it was in old music or purely classical or romantic or impressionistic or modern, and then jazz and then fusion and pop. But I also write pop songs, you know. I've written
I
more than
know.
200 pop songs, and
I
I
know.
sing them. So I mean, with me, it's just the love of beauty and the love of the many possibilities of expressing and crafting music without labeling anything. You know, just not discriminating anything. Anything that's beautiful, anything that wants to take shape and can take shape, I just let it do. I just let it do it. So I can tell you millions of influences and composers and all that. I love and embrace the entire variety of cultures and histories that we have in music. So each
Right.
time, you know, it can lean toward this or that. These days, I can write music in different veins depending on the day and you know, the medium to which I'm writing. It's just like we live in a time where we are saturated with everything that's happened, and I think we're very fortunate to have been exposed to so much greatness, you know, that's behind us, and some which is going on, you know, within us right now. There's so much to take from. There's so much to be inspired by. So why not just you know, have your hand at all of it?
Right, right. Well, not everybody can do that. I mean, you're very good at actually absorbing all of these different cultures and sounds and inspirations and making it your own. That's a very rare talent. I mean, I would say that I love people like that. I mean, I love composers like you that kind of open-minded, and reminds me a lot of one of my favorite composers, Andre Previn, who is
Oh yeah.
always been very, I think, in my opinion, very underrated as a composer, and but he
And a
was a
great
great composer,
and great jazz pianist.
a great jazz. So you remind me a lot. You're part of that sort of family of pianists that are multifaceted. You're a great pianist, and like Previn, that kind of virtuoso pianist that can play anything and can play jazz really masterfully, and can play classical music, any style, really really great. And I don't think Previn could play the accordion, but he was also a conductor. But the his compositions were always very in the kind of a romantic Russian vein. That's kind of Shostakovich, Prokofiev,
Oh,
mixed with the jazz element, with those jazz elements.
yeah.
And I find in
Mm.
your music a lot of that too.
Yeah, man.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I find that you have that kind of approach to the instrument, where you're always kind of blending all these sounds and uh, and traditions that, as you said, like it feels like you're sort of like inspired by them and just letting them, you know, pass through you and get into
Exactly.
your music.
Yeah.
The sonatas are very very hard to play as well. So not only you write music that is great music, but it's very very hard to play as well. And you've been lucky to have a number of great pianists playing your music.
Mhm. Yes. Yes, indeed. You know, I think the difficulty is it depends. It depends on the medium. I think there's certainly a certain part of the repertoire that I write that's it's not particularly difficult. Like there's 36 waltzes, and quite a few of the preludes are playable, and little children are also playing them. So, you know, it depends which music you're pointing to. Yeah, it is true that the piano sonatas and a number of other piano pieces, and definitely the etudes, are very difficult to play. But you know, we can say that about music of Liszt. We can say it about the music of Chopin, Prokofiev, Ligeti, you know, and other composers. You know, the very heavy side of the repertoire, especially the one that ponders on technical aspects like etudes, or the one that requires them, like in sonatas that are big scale works, tends to be pretty difficult to play from many composers, right?
Yeah, no, the sonatas are I can see as a pianist. I've been just looking at the music, and they are very hard to play. And there's one of the sonatas that I saw Marc-André Hamelin playing as well, one of your
Yeah.
sonatas, right?
The third sonata,
And
yeah.
yes, and you played that. There's a recording of you playing that sonata
Yes.
as well, and
Yeah.
it's incredibly difficult to play. I can
Yeah.
tell you that. I want to talk to you about the Preludes. So let's, I've been listening to this 24 Preludes. Are they inspired on Chopin? I see that the harmonic language is similar, but also the way you organize them harmonically are not the same. I think you start
right.
from a
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
What was the harmonic, the way you organize the Preludes harmonically?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea was to really touch on 24 different keys, just like Chopin did with his
Right.
24 preludes. But, it took its course, so while the first one was in C sharp minor, which is
Right.
not usually with Chopin is C major, so he works by the book
Right.
more. I think with me, it went by the inspiration, and I found myself in, in tonal areas where I could not call the piece, let's say, D sharp minor, but there was something else to it, like Phrygian, or even one of them, the later B major one, was not really in B major. I figured that there's other harmonic elements to it or scale aspects to it so I called it B impressionistic scale. So it was after the idea of keys, of major and minor keys, but the music dictates its course, and sometimes even starting one key and ending in another. Like number 4 started in B flat and ended in C major, and I was bothered by it until I understood that I'm not really the composer, but rather I have to follow the scripting of the music, and if the music wants to take a different course than I ideologically conceived, then I have to let it do that.
They are so beautiful. This set of preludes are so beautiful, and the
Thank you.
pianist, she's great.
Gila
Um,
Goldstein.
yes, she's
Yeah,
really great, and she
she's
plays them so
fantastic.
beautifully.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
this was for the Albany Records, right?
It's Albany and Parma. Parma took
Okay,
over Albany Records, so it's basically presented by Parma, but under the label of Albany.
okay. And how is that? How is the record doing? When it came out last year, 2025, right?
Yeah, I mean, we know that thousands of people have listened to it. We see it on the streaming on Spotify. Even though nowadays it's very hard to know, uh,
Right.
how many people are listening to it. Well, and it had quite some radio exposure, several interviews by hosts like Between the Keys of Jed Distler. That was a major one, and we had a
Hmm.
few others. We had various broadcasts, but I'm not yet fully informed. I have to get more reports, maybe from BMI and other places, to know how it's been spreading. I've heard from a lot of people, a lot of musicians about it who had very involved reactions to the sound of the music and to various ones. Everybody picks the one or two or three that they like the best, and uh,
Hmm.
quite a few pianists have started playing them. So hopefully, it's going in the direction of spreading and growing.
Well, you play a lot of your own etudes, which are great, um, and and also I didn't see any. I didn't see you playing any of the preludes. Do you have a recording of the preludes also with
I
you
had no
playing?
time. One of the problems of a composer, especially if you write for different ensembles, is the lack of time. And for
I was
me
just
to
going to ask you about that. That was going to
yeah,
be my next question. How do you write all this, all this music, because you have like a body of works. I mean, 200 pop songs and piano sonatas and orchestra pieces and chamber music. How do you, because you're a very active performer as well. So how do you balance your life as a performer and as a composer? Because composing takes a lot of time. How long did it take you to write the preludes, for example? What was that process
a year.
like?
It was about a year, spread over a whole year. Yeah,
Mhm.
but it's all circumstantial. I mean, I like the night time. This is the best time for me to compose because I'm unencumbered.
Mhm.
I don't need to tend to things that I need to during the day. I teach a lot. I run the New York Piano Academy, and I have
Right.
phenomenal students with big repertoires that I have to teach. That takes up a lot of my time. But um, I think that my fortune is that I can compose at any time, meaning the
Do
moment
you
I
compose at night on the? Do you sit at the piano? You play while
yeah.
you're composing, or you sit right on the page?
No, I really need the instrument.
You need the instrument. Okay.
Yes, I need to hear, yeah, well, not for every note, but I always check everything on the instrument because it
Hmm.
tells me, the realities of sound are beyond what we can imagine. And you can imagine
Right.
something, and then when you hear the actual sound, it's not. Sometimes it's not quite the same as you conceived it. So I need the actual sound to be sure exactly how I want every detail of the music to be there. But as I say, the privilege that I have is that I would say 98% of the time I am inspired and the ideas are coming or moving through me, and I can just pour them onto the page. So it comes to me naturally and relatively quickly. But I wish I
Right.
had more time. I wish I had more time. I don't really perform much. The much of the performing I do nowadays is within my ensembles. The Prophets, which is my jazz fusion ensemble, which has three different branches now, and Danza Nova, which is the accordion one where I do world music and ethnic music. But I don't spend much time performing. Fortunately, I don't think I could have done much of it you
Mm.
know, in the midst of
You
everything
reminded
going
me
on.
of when you were talking about the need for an instrument to kind of guide you through the process of composing. The story of Chopin when he was composing his 24 preludes in Mallorca, and he needed a play el piano to come to him to Mallorca so that he could hear how the preludes sounded in a real piano, on a real piano, because he was trying it on a, on something, on an instrument that he had available there at the monastery or wherever he was staying at the time in Mallorca, and it was really a bad instrument. So he wanted to hear them in a good piano, and finally the play el piano, I think, arrived. But it was kind of a personal odyssey, this trip to Mallorca and the preludes. Is there any? I mean, if you compose 24 preludes, the connection to Chopin and the connection to Bach and to this set of preludes is somehow there. If not in the harmonic language, is in spirit at the very least, right?
I think it's in every way, and not just them. I'm always in love with the preludes of Scriabin and Rachmaninoff,
right?
With the Debussy preludes. All those things come into play, and so preludes is basically free improvisation. You're improvising, so like anything that is like Ravel, and there's even a tribute to Scarlatti. The B minor sonata that inspired the prelude number 13 called Prayer, and it's in the same key, B minor.
Oh, I thought it was Corelli. I thought it was inspired by Corelli.
No, it was Scarlatti.
So it's Scarlatti. Okay.
Scarlatti, yeah.
I was just going to mention that one. Prayer is very beautiful, very beautiful. It has definitely that kind of Renaissance Baroque sound to it. And I was trying to get where the inspiration came from.
Yeah, and there's Hollywood, movies like Ennio Morricone, number 7.
Yes.
Dream is for him. I love his music. And Chick Corea from, of course, from jazz, number 23 is a tribute to him after he passed away. And there was even tribute to soccer players. There's one for Diego Maradona.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding.
You're reminding me. You're like the Sorrentino, the Paolo Sorrentino of music. When you watch a Paolo Sorrentino movie, are you familiar with his movies? He did this movie called La Grande Bellezza, The Great Beauty.
Honestly, I'm not, but I should.
You should watch it. It's one of my favorite. He's one of my favorite directors. He won the Oscar for that movie, La Grande Bellezza, and then he has another movie called Youth with Harvey Keitel, Michael Caine. And his movies are like your music, a collage of so many things. And there's one movie of his that I love called The Hand of God, that is sort of inspired on his upbringing as a child in Napoli, and a fanatic of Maradona at the time when Maradona was playing with Napoli. And so all those elements of football, plus Renaissance art. All those elements are in his art. Sort of
I'm
the
gonna
same
watch it
way.
soon after we're done with this
Please
interview.
watch it, because I mean it's that kind of you remind me of that kind of artist that just wants to put the world in his music. In a way, you remind me of also what Brahms said to Mahler when he first saw the manuscript of his first symphony, and he said something like, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, "Oh, I see that you want to just, you know, cramp the entire world into your symphony,
Right.
because you have from klezmer to to huge symphonic harmonic language, to chamber music, to solo. I mean, it's incredible the amount of elements that these composers, including yourself, include in their music, and I really admired and love so much what you did with the Preludes. I think
Thank
they're
you.
going to be very successful, and I hope a lot of pianists will pick them up. And I like the fact that you can play them, which you cannot do with the Chopin, and you can do with the Scriabin Preludes a little bit on Rachmaninoff. That you can play them by themselves. You could just pick
Yeah.
one or two, and they work
Right.
really well.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I heard a recording of the pianist that recorded the Preludes. She did a recital, and she included only like a group of 3 or 4 at the
Right.
beginning of the
Right.
recital, right?
Yeah, well, she did it in different groups, sometimes groupings of 6, sometimes even 8. It depends on the situation.
And that
And
worked
she's done.
right. That worked fine.
Yeah, that is perfectly fine. Yeah, I think every situation has its own sort of circumstance. So, and she plays a
Mhm.
lot of Latin American music, classical Latin American music, and she's done it in several recitals because she came out with a Latin American album uh, right before mine, right before the Preludes, and she really is a great exponent for all this music, which is not widely heard. It's a chance for
Mhm.
people to hear music they don't usually hear on classical concert stages.
Yes. Yes. No, you have great pianists playing your music all the time. So
Yeah, I'm
you're
fortunate. Yeah,
lucky that way. I think. I mean, we as pianists, we appreciate when composers really bring out things that we enjoy playing, and that we can put our time and effort, and it comes out. It really the audience
yeah,
appreciate it, and I find that, I don't know. I mean, how do you see music today? Because your language is so romantic in spirit. I'm talking only about the Preludes now,
yeah,
not about the sonatas and other pieces that you really incorporate other atonal languages. And the Preludes have a very romantic vein, as the
yeah.
critics have
Mhm.
said before. But you're not afraid of that. You're really not afraid of going back to these old forms and harmonic languages.
Honestly, I would say if I'm afraid of something, is about not doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like
Why?
this should, because why should we limit ourselves, from letting the romantic spirit, totally emanate from what we do? I mean, I don't see. I mean, for me, if I
Mhm.
have to be, if I have to be bothered or distracted by the thought that writing any type of sound, especially sounds that are natural and beautiful and deeply expressive like this, are an issue, then I'm literally sticking a stick in my own wheels. I don't want that. I also
Right.
found out long time ago that writing in any idiom is not plagiarizing. Excuse me. It's not um, anything like copying someone, or or repeating cliches, because I have my own melodies which don't sound to me like melodies of other people, or if they do, it's in a good way. And I have my own harmonic progressions and harmonic shapes and ideas about structure. So if you're loyal to yourself, if you're really in what your mind and soul and heart is dictating to you, especially as an experienced creator and crafter. Only original music is going to come out of it. And it's authentic, it's original, it's free. I believe it's beautiful. Therefore, nothing would stop it. It's gonna keep resonating. You know?
I mean, you're just mentioning the very old values we used to apply when judging good music versus bad music. And how do you feel that? I was talking to another friend recently, composer, and I always ask composers that I like what they feel about the 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 state of the music world right now, the state of contemporary music, and what composers are doing right now. Is it that the I'm very pessimistic about this, and my friend composers always try to make me more optimistic, and they use themselves as examples. I mean, an example of why I should remain optimistic is the fact that you are composing these types of preludes and music that is great in 2025, and we're in 2026 now. So that should give me hope. But how do you feel about our state of music in
General.
today's world?
Yeah, I mean, I've had my qualms. I've heard a lot of music which is staged. Say by orchestras today when they always pay tribute to a modern composer, or other situations where contemporary music is written. And it's not that we're lacking talent. I think musical talent there's always been, and there will always be there. But um, for some reason, a majority of the music that I've been exposed to, or I've been reaching out to hear, did not strike me as music that can really keep uh, an average ear engaged. I hope that because not everybody is a learned musician, right? And most people that go to concerts are really, you may call them average listeners or avid, fervent listeners, right? And then there's something about the great music of the past that does not need to convince, that does not require analysis in order for the regular ear to enjoy it. There are certain physics that work with that, and unfortunately today, I mean, despite the existence and continuity of talent and seriousness about composing, I don't hear enough people electing to use the musical possibilities in a way that can resonate with, I would say, an average ear. So it's in so many instances, it sounds to me really contrary to the physics of music, going with especially classical contemporary music. But I still hear a lot of really good potential and sound in some jazz compositions. There are current jazz composers that are writing very good jazz music, and if you want to call jazz improvisers contemporary composers because they're doing it live on stage, right? They're really composing on stage. I think we have a big bulk of very, very good jazz creator and musicians. In the classical, quote unquote, realm, I think there is a crisis. I think there's a crisis, and too often I just don't find the music that I hear on major stages, especially played by orchestras, engaging to the human ear, and you see it on the people too. I mean, it's usually a certain polite acceptance of having to listen to a new work, and it would be played at the beginning of the concert, and you're just waiting for that to end until the real music comes in. And I wish it wasn't the case. I wish that more gifted composers, especially in the classical vein, would accept that we can write in old forms and with old languages, and it's not necessarily going to summon plagiarism or anything which is associated with copying or stealing or sounding like. And I think this is a sort of a prejudice against old music that I see in mainstream contemporary music cycles, and I hope that it will pass and that we will widely accept the old forms and languages and crafts. I'm writing now a concerto completely after Mozart. After visiting Mozart's homes in Vienna and Salzburg, I don't see why we shouldn't try writing a concerto which is purely after the language and the means, the spirit, and the structures that Mozart wrote in his time. It's a fantastic etude exercise, and I think you can, if you're gifted enough and truthful enough and clever enough, you can come up with something which will resemble Mozart's spirit or anybody else's spirit, Scarlatti, or of obviously the later composers, the Romantic, even Beethoven or Schubert. And there's nothing wrong in trying to go after those, and what they formed, and and even the uses of their harmony or the transparency of a Mozart scale and arpeggio writing. I think there's so much to learn from that, and I think there's room for it to re-express itself. And I'd like to encourage other people to do it. I'm doing it myself.
Well, you have touched on something really important, because most of these composers from the past, and I'm talking about early or middle 20th century, all the way back to, perhaps the Baroque and the Renaissance, they have done exactly that. They have copied and studied and reproduced with their own language, with their own voice, the music of the past. I mean, it's just until we arrive to the sort of postmodern philosophy and ideologies that came attached to those sort of philosophies, that we have an approach that is kind of a French Revolution sort of approach. Let's get rid of the past. The past is dead. It's meaningless. It's associated with all sorts of bad things like racism and patriarchy, and all sorts of things that we hear all the time in the administrations and in concert halls and from reviewers. And the idea is just to erase the past and come up with something new, to sort of decolonize the concert hall and come up with something completely new. Up till now, I don't know what the solution is. If you really decolonize completely and get rid of all of this great music and great art from the past, what will be the alternative? I don't know if you would even fall into the new colonizers category, because your music is pretty much influenced by these old forms that we are still trying to get rid of. And it's quite ridiculous. It's really ridiculous, because, as you said, we go into the concert hall, they program this music that is sort of pregnant with all of this ideology, and then they tried to sell it to the audience in a way that they can understand why they have to subject themselves to this torture for 10, 15, 20 minutes before they get to the part that is the music they want to hear, and they pay the money to to go to hear. So I don't know. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think the fault is in. I blame the artist first. I blame artists that are in positions of power, that instead of speaking out and just supporting the things that people want to hear, they become themselves an instrument to all of these ideologies, and they put their beliefs before talent, before genius, before music, before creation. And then I blame also administrators. I blame the people that are programming the concert halls, that are supporting music that only speaks to their sort of ideology and mind frame, and leaving everything else out. So that's I think a huge problem.
Let me add to what you say, Orlando, which I very much agree with. There's one problem that is not getting attention. The audience does not have a vote. I mean, if the audience had the vote, I think it would be fair enough to, throw a little survey, and just give the audience a chance to respond and say what they felt about the music, and by that form an idea of, will I program this again, will I not? You need to know what the audience is liking and wanting to hear too.
Ron, let me answer. Let me give you an answer and see if you think this would be a satisfying answer to what you just said. I think the same way that we say people vote with their feet, they leave the countries that where they are, not happy with. The same way audiences, they show their appreciation also with their feet. You see a diminishing audience in concert halls. You see what is happening now at the Met, where they basically scaled down to programming operas at the same level they were programming 100 and some years ago. So audiences are doing exactly what you're saying. They are voting on without maybe just writing in a piece of paper or a Google review like we do with a restaurant. Like I would never come back to this meal was terrible. We don't have that, unfortunately, for audiences to review concerts, but they just don't come back. They come and they listen to something, and then they just disappear. So we are losing audiences, and I think it's because not only we are not taking them, like you said, into consideration, but also because we have lost, I think, in my opinion, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I think we have lost faith in the composers that have been responsible for the creations of these institutions, for these concert halls. These concert halls exist because of Beethoven compositions and Bruckner's and Mahler's and Wagner and Bach and Schumann. That's the reason why these churches of arts and music have been built. So it's like saying, I was talking to a friend the other day, he's saying, okay, we're going to go to the Louvre in Paris, but, we'll get rid of the Mona Lisa. Why? Just leave the Mona Lisa. And,
Orlando, yeah, let me add to what you say also. They call it modern music, but it is not modern. It is not modern. We've been chewing this kind of, stuff for
years.
Decades. So, it simply is another version of its own self. It's outdated. Most of it has not proven itself as, what the audience would like to take, to receive, and repeat listening to. I can tell you that I'm starting my own orchestra now. Which will be a 40-piece body of musicians, and I'm going to put orchestral concerts with my music and a few other really very few composers that I believe in, and we're going to most likely do it at Symphony Space in Manhattan. And one of the things we're going to do is give the audience a chance to express their feelings about the music. We're going to know about every piece and anybody would want to express themselves, what they feel about it, and we're going to gauge things also based on how people react to it, because we want to see them come back and we want to give them the music that can engage the audience, most. And I hope that other bodies like the big orchestras, will consider doing a thing like this to study what's working better or less, and understand what the listener is drawn to, and maybe change their strategies or reconfigure, the politics, which are behind it, because there's so much politics. Somebody with money
Or
and an
get rid of the
idea can,
politics
yeah,
altogether.
right,
You know.
yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, just so you know, I mean, I'm not quiet about it. I think there's things we can do and we can be exemplary of. And at least in my series with my orchestra, the audience will be involved. We are going to
Yeah.
know what they feel.
And the other thing I agree with you that you just said, and I've been talking about this also with friends. I do play a lot of contemporary music with my trio of jazz composers. So this is very true what you're saying, and I've been talking to people about this. The jazz musicians that I'm collaborating with constantly, as not only playing with them but also as composers, the music that they compose for my trio and for the other projects that we are that they are working on is really very interesting. In many ways, I think they are at the vanguard of the new language, so to speak, if there is such a thing. At least, I think there are a few reasons why jazz musicians do not have the same privilege as classical musicians to put something on that the audience that are going to go to the Village Vanguard or to the jazz clubs are going to be like, huh? I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm thinking this could be it. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but they are in touch with their audiences in a way that bypasses grants and politics. They have to go in there into that club, and the people that are coming to that club are or running that club are running for the most part a for-profit organization that responds and survives only to ticket sales and to how much money they make at the door. So if you're not giving them something that they enjoy, then they lose money and eventually they close down. So that's one part of it. The other part of it I find, and you're a jazz musician, so you can tell me also if you agree with this, is that you guys are working in a always at the sort of cutting edge of the harmonic language, mixing a lot of the harmonic language in a way that is always searching for not only the effect that is going to shock the audience, but also for beauty and for elements that the classical musicians or composers have sort of left to the side. Those tools where you have harmony in the forefront of your creation somehow. I don't know. You can tell me that if this makes sense.
Look, I would not. Yeah, it does, but at the same time, I don't want to generalize and say that all the modern classical composers are alien to this. I think that some of them are, trying to do that, but maybe the means, the tools that you're using, or what inspires them, right, and what they're trying to do or not to do, is not fed by the best of what music can be, and it falls into the cliches and pastiches of modernism that we've heard for so many years right now. The jazz thing, but jazz is really a culture, that feeds from harmony, and from the song form, it usually goes into enhancing a song. So in its core, it's tonal. Even if it becomes atonal, in its core, it really is trying to enhance, embellish something called a song, where there are chord progressions that are known to us, tension and relief, And, it's not that everything in jazz is perfect. And I want to also say that there's something called jazz mainstream, where you hear some fabulous musicians, but they're so extremely limited just to their own niches in the jazz realm, and often, as great as they are in what they do, don't come across to me as open-minded to all the possibilities around, and I think they're clinging more to the particular language or idiom that they're so fluent with. So it's not that everything is rosy in the field of jazz and terrible in the field of classical. I think it would be too much of a generalization. And I think you have to
Mhm.
look at every musician, in particular. Also, I've encountered some young classical writers that are extremely talented and courageous in writing, and I want to present some of them on my own stage. So I think we have the potential, we have the talent, but we don't have the support, and definitely the mainstream is not helping it. The mainstream is really helping recapitulating the same stew of modernism that hasn't passed the audience test.
I think you put your finger on it, because I was thinking about that. In my pessimism, I started believing that the music was not there, that the talent was not there anymore, that we have come to an end, and that there are very, very few people really left that are, you know, saying anything worth listening to. But I agree with what you're saying. I think the talent is there, the music is there, the people are there. The 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 support is not there, and the institutions that are presenting this talent is not there. So that's I think the biggest issue here.
Because they're dictated, their decisions are dictated by politics and by money. It's like whoever owns money and power and can promote their own projects. And it doesn't take much in order to be able to gain some kind of this power and then find your way to major stages. You can buy your way doing it, and with the opinion of a conductor or someone with whom you're friends who has a major position in one of those places, you can get your music staged. And I've just seen so much and too much of it everywhere. And it was it's disheartening that it's run like that. Again, audience are not given the chance to express their feelings about what they hear. They're there, it's imposed on them. They wait for it to pass, and then they hear the real music. If it keeps continuing this way, we won't see the change. But if we're gonna show that it can possibly be done otherwise, like what I'm suggesting, I hope, an audience can express themselves, and you will see them coming and filling up the seats, in a major hall. Maybe that'll be the beginning of, a new look into things.
Yeah. Right now we are going through a sort of a big debate about the situation at Boston Symphony with the firing of one of the greatest conductors we have today, because of disagreements with the administration, with the board, with the politicians, and I mean, it's unfortunate that that we're trying to fix what ain't broke, so to speak. This is a great conductor that the Boston Symphony has. This is a man that is bringing in audiences, and subscriptions are doing great, and he's just somebody who's programming the old guard that we're trying to get rid of. The Beethovens and the Bruckners and all of these things, and we want less of that and more of something else. So he was in major disagreement with this, and he was let go, and the orchestra musicians are up in arms, complaining and really trying to fix the situation, but I don't think it's going anywhere. And at the end, an orchestra in the U.S. Will lose a great artist, and that's very sad. That's a very sad thing that
Right.
we're going through. So I want, before we end, I wanted to talk about your album Prophets with your jazz group, because man, I mean, like, first of all, the level of virtuosity in the playing and the writing, and you guys are incredible musicians, and this is what we're talking about. You have a combination of like great musicians that are amazing players, all virtuoso players, and then you have the kind of music that is just like uh, really exciting and engaging. Um, I started laughing when I heard the first piece, from having so much fun, because it was just so fast and so upbeat. Um, what is the name of the first song in the album?
It's landscapes.
Landscapes.
Yeah.
Oh boy! I mean, I was listening to it, and I
Do you know
started
how old it is?
smiling.
Do you
How
know
old?
how old it is? 1981.
Landscapes you wrote it in 1981.
It's when I was having a trip down to the desert before Israel returned the part of Sinai back to Egypt, with the peace treaty that was signed then. I wanted to go to the southest most part, of the desert by the Red Sea. And then the landscapes, those hills and mountains and desert-like sites were actually the inspiration, and the travel itself were the inspiration for that piece. So it was basically my first complete jazz composition for an ensemble. And yeah, so
it is a great piece to start the album. Yeah. I think we'll get people excited about listening to the rest of the music, and I started laughing. I really started laughing when I was listening to it, because I was like, first of all, it's just so, I mean, did you guys have to rehearse this a lot? I mean, I imagine.
Oh, trust me, it's a unison. It's a really fast and difficult unison between the flute and the piano right hand. The other parts are difficult too. The bass and drums are very demanding.
And it doesn't stop. It goes on and on and
it's
on.
Perpetual motion.
Come on, Ron. I mean, like, really, your musicians are going to quit at some point. You have to give them a little break.
No, well, we learn to live with no oxygen. It's like, you need to resuscitate them. You need to resuscitate them.
Well, you're killing them. You're killing them with this. It's just really,
no, they love it. We love performing it.
I bet.
It's
bet they
just do. So you know, Orlando, the music of prophets that you've been hearing spans about 40 years of composing.
Oh,
so
nice.
This was a great, because we never issued it. Even though we had the great support of the great producer Thomas Frost.
I know.
Who was Horowitz's producer, and he's the first one who produced our. He produced our first demo. Then I had a very different roster of players, which included Mark Stoker on flute and Daryl Jones, the great bassist, who was Miles Davis's bassist, and now he's with the Rolling Stones, and Tal Bergman, who played with people like Lou Reed, and Chick Corea. So I had those great players then, but for many reasons, personal, historical, evolutional, we did not come up with a marketed product all these years. So this is, for me, is a birth of something I've been pregnant with like for 40 years. So it was a big belly, and therefore, all that sort of got unleashed, and I think you hear a lot of very different streams of sound, and
you hear everything, and you need amazing players to be able to play this music. I mean, this is like you can't. This takes a lot of work and talent to play this.
2 years in the studio. It took 2 years to record. We had to do them in increments. It's difficult.
And I find that in our hyper specialized world, sometimes we neglect to see and to validate composers that are experimenting with all these sorts of genres. I think that's an incredible thing. I mean, I remember reading critics' reviews of Andrew Previn or Frederick Gulda. You know, they called him the terrorist of the piano because he would, you know, he would do things that were eccentric, or because he would play jazz and or stopped his career as a classical pianist, which, by the way, you know, one of the greatest pianists of all time, and
Yes.
his recordings of Bach, Beethoven are
And
just absolutely, to me, you know, some of my
yeah.
favorites. So I don't know
Yes,
what kind of terrorism he was doing, and the jazz recordings are a lot of fun. He was really a
absolutely.
good
Yes.
jazz player, but we tend to either you belong to our group or you don't belong. We have these, we continue to have these mentalities. I think it has to do with
Yeah.
the politics, and it has to do with like, you know, um, having preserving the little you know, nest of power.
Well, yeah.
And I hate when they do the same to composers like Charles Ives, you know, because he was an insurance salesman. You know, he
Uh-huh.
was not really a composer. I
Uh,
disagree. You know, I don't think that's you know, that's right
yeah. Well, but he
or
broke
true.
through. He broke through that, you know, prejudice. You know, eventually. You know who else was a pretty amazing blender of different styles? Dudley Moore, the comedian. Are you
Yes.
familiar with him? I mean, he was a
Well, not
great
only familiar with him,
classical pianist.
he's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, in those people, you really see that reflected, that openness and love for everything. You know, it's you know, you're right. What we are lacking is bridging, and that's the one thing I'm hoping to do. I want to bridge all musical streams, you know, and I think we're all still in one family and all aiming for the same goal and purpose, you know, which
Yes.
is
Yes.
let music unite us rather than
Yes.
separate us, you know. And the sad thing is that musicians are just locking into their own small worlds. As great as they are in that, you know, there is a flaw in it closing them up from each other. And we should see, especially in today's world, you know, where you need unity and you're saturated with all the goodness and genius that we've heard over so many years and still going. And you want to see all the things coming together more. This is what I'm hoping I'm doing with my own music or with my own dealings with music. You know, I'd love to see more people coming under that sort of umbrella. You know, to fuse things. You know, to have us all flow into each other. You know, and from each other. You know.
I think this is a great place to end this conversation. I think I couldn't have said it better, and I really hope so too. I think that's that's the answer. You just said it, so I don't want to add anything else to this. But a big, huge thanks for agreeing to do this
Of
conversation,
course.
and for giving me the opportunity to revisit some of your music and to fall in love with some new music. I I I hope that this episode can bring new audiences to your music,
Mm.
and you can get the appreciation and the love that you deserve for what you do, my friend, which is
Abs-
really quite amazing. So honored to speak to you, and let's do it again soon and talk about anything else, any project that you're doing. Let's do it again when, you know, maybe talk about the orchestra that you're
Oh,
starting and whatever project you're doing. But let
absolutely.
this be the first of many.
Yes, and I just want to say that the pleasure was utterly mine, and that I want to extend a big thank you to you for the opportunity and for your great openness and intelligence in presenting and the kind of questions that you brought. And I'm so much in agreement with everything that you said.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank
I'll
you.
talk to you soon.
Very
Bye.
soon. Bye bye.